All right. So I messed up big time. I recorded I haven't showed it to you. Videos. It's a 30-minute video here. I recorded this whole thing. Um, but unfortunately, I forgot that when I record a local video, uh, my Spotify doesn't basically when I stream on Twitch, my Spotify doesn't auto break everything from the Twitch VOD and just have the VOD, so that this entire thing just has music playing in the background, and I had to scrap it. So, unfortunately, you're not really going to get my unedited thoughts going through these, but the fortunate side is now you're going to actually just get the more condensed version of all this stuff there with the warrior changes on the alpha. Primarily, what we were going to look at was all of these changes and all of these notes here. But realistically, going through all of these and looking at the notes and the change, like we can do that. That's fine to do. But we don't have to. And the reason why we don't have to is because of the good work of Mr. Arkham Tyros here in the Skyhold Discord. If you're looking for warrior updates that you can see as well, I would highly recommend them. Um, but because I've already kind of consolidated my ideas and my thoughts, we're just going to go through these pretty quickly compared to what I did before. But a big thank you to Mr. Arkham to really condense all of these into a more readable version. Um, we're also going to we'll do a little supplementing of this with the talent calculator that we can look at as well. But thanks to him for doing this, he does a lot of the guide writing on Wowhead and I think Icy Veins. I'm not 100% sure. But let's re-record this thing. Let's go through it pretty quick. Essentially for Colossus, what they did is they changed this talent here for Rally, which now when your health is brought below 35%, you gain second wind healing for... It's basically like a lot of those talents that you see where like paladins will auto cast Word of Glory on themselves if they hit a certain threshold, or I think shamans pop like a 40% heal automatically when they hit a certain threshold. It's just kind of like one of those where you just have a heal that pops on a threshold. The other thing too is with the changing of the name and how it works, it says you gain a second wind. I'm pretty sure this talent will not require second wind itself to be talented to work. So that is a nice little addendum to that. Um, Honestly, I really hope they make Fueled by Violence better, because I hope they just add like some of this healed damage into like a small overshield or something that kind of encroaches on the ignore pain space. But to be realistic about it, I'm not a big fan of ignore pain. Um, Having both of these as certain buttons you have to press, and then pressing them, maybe you take damage, maybe you don't. It's a very weird situation to be sitting in. So I kind of wish they just kind of give Feel by Violence a capped overheal percentage instead. But most likely, a lot of people, depending on the content, are probably going to be taking Rally. And then if you're more active in your play style, you'll probably be taking No Stranger to Pain, just because the amount uh, a lot of the danger when you're facing damage is being one shot essentially nowadays with how things work. So it's a good talent, relieves second wind a little bit, but I think No Stranger to Pain is going to probably still help us quite a bit, and especially Mythic Plus allow us to survive those big one shots coming in. And they also nerfed this talent and this talent of its damage reduction by half. Previously, we were able to gain 15% damage reduction for 10 seconds and during the Demolish cast. We still take 10% damage reduction during the cast, but now we no longer have that as powerful lingering effect or passive effect. Maybe it was a little too strong for prot. Maybe 5% was a little too strong. Um, we'll see. Maybe they'll tune it back up. Who knows? But essentially, our defensive value got nerfed a little bit in the Colossus tree. Moving over to Slayer, a lot of these changes are actually focused on more so towards Fury than they are towards Arms. And essentially, what they did is through a lot of these talents, they just made them Raging Blow focused. This is Raging Blow damage instead of Bloodthirst. This is Raging Blow proc instead of Bloodthirst. Um, Now these cooldowns reset. Uh, these reset the cooldown of Raging Blow instead. They have removed the attack speed steroids from the Slayer tree. So now you have Blade Storm either deals more damage or you have your next primary damage button after Blade Storming deals additional damage. That one doesn't seem nearly as valuable as just Blade Storm doing more damage. So, I mean, there might be a situation where there's like a big, excuse me, a big damage amp potentially. But even then, if you're doing a big damage amp, they just buff the shit out of Blade Storm. It does a ton of damage now. So, I mean, honestly, realistically, you're just going to take the one that does the more damage. So it's not like that crazy. It adds options. Maybe the damage after Blade Storm ends with your Hurricane buff might be more of a PvP thing. When you play this as arms, it buffs your Mortal Strike, so maybe that's maybe a little more of a PvP thing. But realistically, a lot of this is just moving a lot of effects from Bloodthirst to Raging Blow, um, which I think is kind of good. They've basically what they did is they made Slayer the Raging Blow spec, and then Mountain Thane the Bloodthirst spec. Um, but I'll talk about the changes a little bit, and then I'll kind of get my conclusion after instead, so we can actually kind of talk about the potential consequences of that. Whereas for Slayer, because Raging Blow has a lot of different support, um, because of the chance to gain resets and increase the resets of Raging Blow. So this Slayer strikes now have a higher chance to reset Raging Blow. When it resets, it has a chance to do additional damage, um, or do more damage on the next cast. So who knows? This might be something more of like alleviation towards requiring something like Hack and Slash, where when you cast, where Hack and Slash just really gives you a bunch of Raging Blow refunds. Um, so that might be able to free up another talent point towards like maybe Cold Steel Hot Blood or whatever. Because if we're picking Raging Blow, we're buffing Bloodthirst crit chance. They buff the base damage of Bloodthirst. And then if we're going to get it a crit chance, it'll get to 100%, then it'll crit, it won't Cold Steel Hot Blood. So maybe that's kind of what they're looking for. But that's mainly what they've kind of messed with over here. They've rechanged some names, they've moved some stuff around, like the ability to kick and Stormbolt while Blade Storming's down here in Unrelenting Assault. They've changed some names, right? But the big talent changes are these 2 points here, um, where and just changing most of these affections to Raging Blow. Another thing to note, I think, is that they changed. This used to be called Frenetic Flurry, and then it said it. Ow. The wording before was that it would cause a short blade storm or whatever. I think they people were really talking about, well, why isn't it procking Hurricane? Can it proc Unhinged? Etc. etc. So I think they realized that the wording was bad and how it sounded was incorrect. So they changed the name, they changed the wording, and now it says a flurry of steel instead of blade storm. So it's like, hey, look, you're not going to get your blade storm modifiers off this thing. So they're just kind of clarifying, redoing it, and then once again changing it to Raging Blow instead of Bloodthirst. But moving over to Mountain Thane, they've essentially changed a lot of Mountain Thane over to Bloodthirst now, because now this is Bloodthirst and Rampage damage. The Burst of Power, when a Lightning Strike hits, it has a chance to make your next 2 Bloodthirst no cooldown and do more damage. Lightning Strikes happen more often, but they happen less often during Avatar as kind of a trade-off. Um, Now your Thunder Blasts are still generating from Bloodthirst. So they've kind of shifted it to where Slayer is the Raging Blow spec and Mountain Thane is the Bloodthirst spec. But Mountain Thane is starting to have a really big problem now, especially with the buff to Crushing Force, where we have all these points, but now what's happening is we're required to go all the way into like if we're looking at these points we're taking, because you're most likely playing Recklessness and Anger Management, you're gonna have a ton of rage. Like right now, you're already sitting at about 15 of your 31 talent points spent, and like I didn't even take Spell Reflect at that point. I mean, technically you don't have to take Overwhelming Rage, but anytime you're playing with Anger Management and uh, anytime you're playing, essentially playing Fury feels really bad without this increased rage pool, um, because you will essentially overcap and lose a lot of rage without this additional cap. So this is technically throughput for Fury because you only have a 20% threshold to actually spend rampages, etc., etc. You might have really big swings of rage with the amount of rage you're getting from Recklessness and Wind Fury procs and all that stuff. So that's kind of what we're looking at. They've buffed Thunderblast a little bit for prot. They've buffed the amount of rage you get from it. Um, they reduce the chance for it to trigger from lightning strikes. Burst of power. Now, this is a new change for it affecting Bloodthirst instead of additional the Raging Blow instead. There is some different talents too here that are kind of weird. So now if we're looking at this Keep Your Feet on the Ground talent, whenever you cast a Thunder Blast, it used to reduce the damage you take by 4 seconds. Now it's, or by 4%. Now it's moved over here in this section. Now it's 8%, and its armor is increased by 8%. I mean, you're just going to take this on Fury, because now, obviously, what this leads into um, is it just straight up leads into the fact that now you are going to be taking. Sorry, I just have to like throw some points in here. Now, this armor to the teeth talent and this talent, this is just damage. This is just straight up plus damage for the class. Maybe that's a tuning knob they want. Like they'll just give Mountain Thane more armor as a tuning knob to do more aura damage. I don't know. Um, but it's kind of weird. The other one, which is new, which is essentially whenever you Victory Rush is now a mini defensive that increases your max health by 10%, and any of the overhealing that you got from it will be healed to you after the effect expires. So you can pre Victory Rush like a big damage instance, and then have a little bit of healing coming in after that. Um, but realistically, for Fury, we're just looking at this talent here because it's just throughput at this point. They've changed these talents over here, and they also changed Valajar training, which I think was something good. Valajar training, the previous talent that was within the spot, they moved these talents and this talent swap places, I believe as well. But what Valajar training was that they removed was every rage you spent reduced the cooldown of Ravager. So what was going to end up happening is you were just going to desync your Ravager from your Recklessness, and it was, I think desyncing your cooldowns is going to, it's really awkward and weird. Um, but they seem to not like that either. So now Ravager will remain in line as you're running anger management with Recklessness and Ravager as Mountain Thane. I mean, maybe we'll try running Reckless Abandon as Mountain Thane. I'm not sure of the numbers, right? Only time will tell on what's better damage wise. Um, but now they've changed it to something that activating Recklessness grants you a charge of Thunderblast, and Thunderblast calls down a lightning strike on an enemy if it hits. So I wonder if that's like your primary target or if that's all targets. Because imagine you're like in a big pack. Like imagine you're in a big pack of mobs and you Thunderblast and you hit like 8 things, and then all 8 things just go poof, and you just get a big lightning strike on all of them. It'd be cool, but I doubt that's how it works. It's probably only the primary target. Um, but that snap induction talent here is new. Just so you pop your Just so what's probably this is for is when with Berserker's Torment, when you pop your Recklessness, you get a charge of Avatar. So you're just going to pop Recklessness, get a charge of Thunderblast. With that Avatar buff, you can fit in a Rampage and a Thunderblast, right? That's probably the idea of it there. They changed some stuff here for Prot as well, specifically where Demo Shout reduces damage, the damage enemies deal to him. Snap Induction is also different for protection specifically. Snap Induction and now Demo Shout grants a charge of Thunderblast. So it's basically you're just getting more Thunderblast charge generation through not just either RNG, which is decent. But the one thing going into all of this, I did, like I talked about, the talent point economy is just in an the talent point economy is in shambles for Mountain Thane specifically because now they have 4 required talents compared to everybody else, and that's without them trying to get Stormbolt or Shockwave or Rumbling Earth, or maybe even some of like or Intimidate. Intimidating Shout sucks because it's still capped 5 targets for some reason, but a lot of these things are but they're very talent point stricken, and I'm kind of worried about Mount Thane. The other reason why I'm worried about Mount Thane is while Bloodthirst, they're trying to make a better button, a lot of its support down here doesn't do a lot. Like you have Thunderous Roar and Gushing Wound damage, which is decent for Cold Steel Hot Blood. Vicious Contempt, while okay, is kind of. You've got Single Minded Fury existing on the tree. Yeah, I don't know. The the actual talents you have that support Bloodthirst are pretty minimal compared to stuff like Raging Blow. That if you look over at Slayer, now you have Raging Blow, Raging Blow, Raging Blow feeds into Rampage, Raging Blow, and then you're looking at the Slayer tree itself. You have more Raging Blow. Like Bloodthirst just needs way better supports in the tree to make it feel better, and that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of worried for Mountain Thane. The other reason why I'm worried for Mountain Thane is um, because Thunderblast is just Thunderclap, it's but better. It still affects 5 targets and then does reduce damage beyond that. But the problem becomes single target, right? If you're doing any kind of single target damage, Thunderblast has no inherent single target steroid. So if the design of the Thunderblast button is around damaging 5 targets, when you're fighting one target, you're simply just doing 20% of the damage that the button is designed to do to the targets around it. Um, so I think that's potentially concerning. That's more of a tuning thing, and tuning is completely different. But personally, it is somewhat concerning that Mount Thane is going to be extremely, extremely strapped for points with how the talent trees are set up. Um, but now, more of just like a general kind of thoughts about it is I'm I'm a little worried for Warrior, to be honest. Um, Maybe I don't need to be. Obviously, it's still very early on in the PTR cycle. But the main, honestly, it's kind of a grass is greener kind of thing. So my concerns might be just non-existent in a couple weeks when they actually give us some decent stuff. Um, but I look at all these different classes and mages getting their 14th rework, the demonic cores and warlocks are getting their 38th fucking rework for that shit because they don't know exactly how they want it to work. Wind Monker monks are looking really really happy with what they got. Rogues are still happy with what they got. Demon hunters, I don't know how they feel about their hero talents. I've heard ups and downs. Um, but I do find myself concerned for Warrior because more so than anything, we didn't receive a rework. We got a rearrangement. They're finally, I guess, starting to get a clear idea of what they want our hero talents to be. And don't misunderstand me, right? Don't misunderstand that I think these changes are in the right direction for what they want these things to be, right? Because even when you think Mountain Thane, blood and thunder, bloodthirst and thunderclap, it makes sense. Like the thematics are there, they're working in the right direction. Slayer's working in the right direction. They seem fairly happy with Colossus for now. And if Demolish just does big damn and looks cool, that's honestly all it really needs to be. Uh, but I think they're doing a decent job and working in the right direction. But one thing I feel that Warrior really needs is they need something more than just in the right direction. Is how I'm feeling currently. I could be, like I said, this is just total just feel. But like I even look over at Ret Paladins and they're getting stuff like when they Divine Storm, now their Templar's Verdict can hit up to four additional targets or some shit. Like, where's our cool stuff, man? Where's our cool stuff? Can we get something that's like really cool? Like, can we get some like sick talents? Because like we don't even have anything new. We haven't gotten anything new. Everything's the same. They've adjusted our hero talents, but most of those are like modifiers and variables and 8% armor, which just gives us damage with percent armor to damage and strength. But like, can we get some cool stuff, man? Like we just need like a one cool thing. Like a good cool thing is how I'm just really feeling right now with the warrior class in general, because we just feel not cool behind everything else. Um, and speaking of just how you design a class, right? Obviously, there's a lot of things I don't consider off the top of my head. There's a lot of things I need to like rethink when I consider like what about PvP, what about this, what about that? Because there's a lot of things in this game. This game has a lot of hats, right? And you want to make sure that it's at least fitting inside the hat, right? So there's a lot of things you have to consider. But in terms of theme for Warrior, I think one thing that actually might be hurting it in the form of design is almost the fact that it's too simple. And not necessarily in rotation, right? They can do whatever they want with the rotation. And they've been doing a decent job with like, they just kind of went, you know what? Fuck it. Single target, Mortal Strike, arms, AoE, you hit the cleave button. You hit the cleave. And that, I'm cool with that. But when I mean simple, I'm mainly talking about talents and stuff where I go, well, what is a warrior? And you go, whether or not you consider prot or not, you go, well, big sword hit good, right? And obviously, look at that and you think of that, you go, oh, that must be very simple, right? But I feel like something as simple as warrior with that kind of theme is actually kind of harder to design around, right? If you have, let's say, a mage where you can design around frost, fire, and the arcane arts, and you have every single variation of water magic you can mess around with, essentially for frost. You can design whatever, but for warrior, you got two-hand sword good. You know, like it's. I can see where the design and thematics might actually be difficult and limiting in terms of our class, and I'm not exactly sure of a good option there. I haven't thought about it a lot yet, but I think it will be. But one of the things I think I would personally like as a warrior is some form of ranged generator. Because I don't like heroic throw. I don't like heroic throw, and one of the things warrior technically was and has been um, is that warrior's been the master of arms, like literal master of all weapons. Since vanilla, Warrior's been allowed to use every single weapon type. It's why we're allowed to transmog almost every single weapon type in the game because we're our class is designed and allowed to use every weapon. Funnily enough, one of the best weapons in the whole game for warriors in classic WoW was the fucking Serpentine Cavern quest staff that people used almost all the way up until the Whirlwind staff, the Whirlwind axe. We used a staff for half of our leveling. You know what I mean? We as warriors take anything around us and use it through brutal ferocity. I don't know if that's a right word. But we can take anything and everything around us and just use it to our advantage. So like it might be dumb, but maybe we could just get like a fucking a generator skill. Like we don't need heroic throw. Fuck it, dude. Just let us throw a big rock. Let us just throw a rock or something. I don't know. Because one of the plights I have with Warrior is that we don't have any form of ranged option, right? We don't have any good ranged option. Not to say I don't want a ranged rotation, or I don't want to be like, oh, well, we can step out of range to do this button and this button because we pull out our bow and then we could, because I think getting into the master of arms or master of weapons is kind of a different thing than arms and fury and prot. I think that's a little different. But I do think that it feels very weird that the moment we're not able to essentially touch the boss with our little clammy hands, that we're not allowed, that we can't, doesn't feel like we have any options or the ability to do anything when we're warriors, man, charging into battle. Like fuck it, we'll throw up a rock and knock you over the head with it. Like that's dark age shit, right? So maybe something like that would be cool. I don't know. It's probably not even worth putting in. It's just I'm kind of grasping at straws here. I just really, really wish that Warrior was getting some cool stuff, but I can also understand how the limiting themes of the class could kind of be holding it back to getting something good because the closest we've gotten to being magical in nature is like ignore pain and this Mountain Thane stuff with lightning, like blood and thunder. Like maybe they honestly need to take this Mountain Thane concept with blood and thunder and kind of feed some of that into the base class tree a little bit. Give us just a little more mysticism in there. I don't know. Um, just as something more that they can mess around with because right now it feels really weird. Maybe they can work more towards the like tectonic shifting of stuff. Like the way I imagine Shockwave isn't you're plunging your sword in the ground. Shockwave is a stomp that shakes the earth that makes everyone stunned and fall over. That's the way I see Shockwave as a warrior because our brute strength literally breaks the ground in front of us. Um, I don't know. Maybe they need to make our hits a little more physical, or maybe they need to do something. I don't necessarily think they need to give. Maybe we just need a little more range. I don't. But that's one of the things they talked about not liking, right? They talked about how they thought that the social experiment essentially of giving everyone extended range, or well, everyone but warrior extended range felt really bad between the melee specs. But what I would personally like to see is just a little more leeway. Um, or either we get more leeway or honestly take the leeway away from everybody else. Because why are people with daggers having more range than us, right? Why are people with one-handed swords have more range than someone using a two-handed sword at its most value? Which its most value is having fucking range. That's why you use a two-handed weapon for its range. Ah, I don't know, man. Maybe Warrior's one of the specs that actually deserves a bit of extended range because it's all it has. It doesn't have any form of option. Um, but now I'm just rambling. Uh, but that's how I'm feeling on these changes. Once again, thanks, Mr. Arkham, for writing this up, allowing me to have a more condensed look at this. I didn't go over these as detailed as I did in the other video I showed you, just because after I've gone over them detailed like that once, doing it again just seems pretty, doesn't make any sense. I mean, shit, this video is already 30 minutes. But yeah, that's going to be it for me before I ramble too much. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a good one. Peace.